Parents who have disowned or genuinely stopped loving your child. What happened? Story 1. I was a kid and my sister was much older when my parents were finally done with her. From my recollection, she went through the cycle of making one stupid decision after another, even when they would tell her and show her why she shouldn't make that decision. Dropped out of college they were paying for, and used the tuition money she was refunded to buy a Firebird, then quit her job. Let the car run out of oil, kept driving it until the engine seized up. Parents bailed her out again, buying her what they could afford on one salary, a decent used station wagon. Only catch, she'd take the job my dad called in favors for. Parents come home one day to find strange car in driveway, a Sunbird. It was old and junky, but it was a 1-to-1 trade my sister managed to swing on the station wagon. Lo and behold, old and junky car breaks down almost immediately, and she simply stops showing up to work, gets fired. Moves out with no car and no job, accusing parents of controlling her life. Moves back in 3 months later. Upset that I've moved into her old bedroom, which is bigger, demands to be moved back into the bigger bedroom. Parents say no. She threatens to move out. She goes on a semi-hunger strike about the bedroom. Turns out she was shoplifting and stockpiling candy to eat so she wouldn't have to eat with the rest of the family. During this time, dates a number of less than stellar boyfriends, including a guy who is 30 years older but drives a Porsche, a guy who had been convicted of sexual abuse, and another guy who generally creeps everyone out by jumping the fence and just standing in the backyard at all hours of the night. Eventually, she's told to pay rent, go to college, or move out. She chooses to move out and is gone by the end of the week. I clearly remember her threatening to burn the house down as she left. 2 months later, she asks to move back in because her roommate and best friend kicked her out. Parents say no, she's on her own unless she wants to go to college or get a job and keep it. Car breaks down again for good and calls and asks parents if they can buy a new one for her. Not new as in new to her, new as in brand new model year. My parents' newest car was 15 years old at the time. They say no, and not to call again. There was a whole raft of other things too, including forgetting to pick up her grandmother from doctor's appointments, generally loathing the existence of the rest of her family, and then, ironically, deriding the family as rednecks when she finally managed to hook a guy who was a small business owner and actually had some money. Anywho, it's been about 20 years since I've spoken to her, and from the stuff I hear now, and again through the pipeline, I'm better for it. I do expect her to come calling when my parents pass and she finds out I'm the sole heir. Another guy who generally creeps everyone out by jumping the fence and just standing in the backyard at all hours of the night? Your sister dated Michael Myers. I was about to say maybe this was just something about personalities clashing with the sister and the parents, but it seems like other people just didn't care for her as well. Her best friend kicking her out? And what's with the focus on cars? I mean, what did this other guy do that she finally managed to nab? Was he doing something in car dealerships or something? I guess she just really wanted to have the nice cars, but just didn't want to take care of them. Anyway, story 2. Other way around. My father had this incredible stupid shrew as a wife. She is just terrible. She left him, owned me quite a bit of money, cheated on my father, and on and on. after 3 years of marriage. She's around 36, and my father is 50. He did everything for her, and she just made him miserable, but he kept going. When she left my father, he became really, really depressed, and I cared for him. Hoping that he would get over the whole situation, etc., we even fought the whole divorce together. He got better and everything. I was really happy for him. Then came the day that she had no money left, and she came back to my father. He told me about it, and I was so angry that he didn't learn from the story before. I told him that I didn't want to see her ever again, and I won't do anything with him if she was there as well. The day came when my father and I wanted to meet for lunch. As I arrived, I saw her sitting there with him. I went to the place and said that she had to leave or I'm going to leave. He became mad, and for that, I left. He tried to do the same move again. I had told him to take off and never spoke to him again. I never trusted this woman. It became better, and then I found out about her cheating, lying, and everything. She told me to take off when I wanted my money back. I won't trust her ever again, but I can't help my dad. I told him everything, and he's still blind through those love curtains. Sounds like my dad. He will stick up for my narcissistic mother until he's blue in the face. I went no contact with her, but told him that he could come and visit me and his, at the time, newborn granddaughter any time he wanted. Nope. Wouldn't do it without my mom. It eventually got to the point where it became a lost cause, and I realized we'll never have a relationship as long as Mom is alive. That is such a heartbreaking statement to have to say. I'm not knocking that she realizes that this person is awful. I'm not saying that. It's just that it comes down to that. Do any of you out there have a relative or even a parent that you've gone no contact with? What was the reason you had for that? Story 3. I'm not a parent. I've never disowned a child. My parents disowned my oldest sister. I'm the youngest of 3 girls. My oldest sister had a horrible relationship with my father, blames me for getting in the way of their relationship. She had her first baby to spite him when she was 16 years old. My father refused to give her money because she met a deadbeat child predator and got pregnant again, then again, and again. She constantly put herself in deadbeat before kids. Dad would send money to girls for Christmas and birthdays and never heard a thing. He finally gave up. She's 30, has 6 daughters, and lives in a mobile home in North Carolina. We hadn't seen or heard from my sister until June of this year. My oldest niece contacted me asking to come to Florida, where I live, for the summer to get her and her sisters out of the trailer. I agree, contact sister, and she agrees. I set up plane tickets and organize the rooms they'll stay in. When they got here, they were completely disheveled, clothes visibly dirty, smelled foul, so covered in lice that my white towels stained gray from removing them. My niece informed me that they had been without water and electricity for 6 months. They live in a 2-bedroom mobile home. There are holes in the roof, bugs and rats everywhere. As a family, we decide the girls aren't going back to North Carolina. We tell my sister to come to my parents' house in Florida to get her life together and get back on her feet. She refused because Deadbeat is not invited. Ironically, she found out that Deadbeat is cheating on her. She confronts him, and he kicks her out of Junkhole trailer. Deadbeat said, "I would rather be homeless than live with you." Sister now works for the dollar store and doesn't pull her weight with kids. At least the girls are safe now. Your oldest niece is a smart girl to contact you. You're a kind soul to agree and open your heart. Wow. That was just completely tragic, and it was amazing that they were able to find the space for this girl's daughters and take care of her. I'm just sad that she just still isn't able to pull her own weight. Do you think she'll able to get back on her feet and be able to start pulling her weight? Maybe she's not making any money at this dollar store to be able to help out. Do you think there's any chance she'll be able to get back on her feet? Story 4. I wouldn't say I've disowned or stopped loving my son, but it's real tough to find love for him. He's almost 14 next month, and he's currently out of our home at a treatment facility. He's averaged 2 arrests a year for the last 2 years, and he's attacked my wife several times, our daughters several times, and the neighborhood kids several times. He's run away from school, run away from home, and tried to push me off the roof of our house after threatening to jump off and hurt himself. We have become that family in our town where the police are called to our home on a semi-regular basis. He's been getting more violent as he gets older, not to mention bigger and stronger, and I honestly don't see an end in sight. The key fact that I'm leaving out is that he's been diagnosed as high-functioning autistic and is also bipolar. That's like putting walls around a tornado and expecting it to stay inside. A lot of what has occurred he had little control over because of the way his mind is, where he's constantly at war with himself, structure versus chaos. And my wife and I have tried desperately to give him the best life we can while keeping ourselves and our daughters safe. But I'm tired. It's been 8.5 years we've been going through this with him, and I've been ready to throw in the towel on him for a while. But my wife refuses to let him go. So we wake up every morning trying to give him the best life for him and our girls. My brother has the same combo and was in a similar situation at that age. He's 10 years older now and studying for a PhD and engaged to a wonderful woman. I'm not promising that it will get better, but it can. I've seen it happen. Feel free to message me if you want to talk more. Story 5. My parents disowned my older sister. She always struggled growing up more than us. She became a teen mom with a bad older dude, partied a lot, etc. But my parents helped her a lot. They do okay for themselves, but had a no co-signing rule for all 6 of my siblings and I. Still, they co-signed for her house so she could get a head start. She didn't pay the mortgage for almost 3 years before my mom got served in front of all the other nurses at her work. My parents worked tirelessly to try to work out deals where my sister and her family kept the house and got some leniency, but to no avail, because my sister never showed up for court dates. During this time, she paid $12,000 for IVF and got pregnant with her 5th kid. When my mom demanded some of the money back, she accused my dad and my brother of beating her sons when my parents took them to Disney World. He didn't, and said she'd file a police report if he asked for money again. They kept asking because it wasn't true. She awkwardly joined us for Christmas and punched my brother in the face during the meal for humiliating her oldest son by asking him if he wanted to work at my brother's company for good pay. Her oldest son is in and out of jail, and my brother was trying to help him after his release, but her son said he didn't want a job and got mad. She then called the cops and told them the same brother had illegal guns in his truck, and they came on Christmas night and searched his truck. No guns found. Needless to say, she is not welcome anywhere near any of us, and my mom still cries about it, but refuses to talk to her again. My heart actually aches for your mom. Story 6. Not me, but my great-grandma. This story is really sad, but also interesting, so I thought I'd share it. She was a young Creole teenager. French Creole was her first language, and she was a quarter to half black like me, with tan skin and loose brown curls. She was born in Florida, but when things started getting worse for black people in Florida, her family relocated to Texas. For those who don't know, Creole people tend to play heavily into colorism. Although they're definitely mixed race, they prioritize light-skinned people. The looser your curl, the lighter your skin, the more white you look, the better. Her parents had high expectations for her to marry a wealthy, light-skinned man who would take care of her. Instead, she met my great-grandfather, a poor, dark-skinned man jumping from job to job, working for farmers and trying to make a living. The two of them fell in love. They were just teenagers. Her parents threatened to disown her if she continued seeing him, and like a rebellious teenager, she refused. They wanted her to do better. She wanted him to be in love. They might have broken up eventually if she didn't get pregnant. But she did, and that was the end of it. Her parents basically said, "You've ruined your life," and disowned her right there. The whole family disowned her. No one would speak to her. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Not a single person stood up for her, so she had no choice. The two of them moved to California so he could get a job picking oranges. He built a daughter. They had their first daughter. She was 16. She never saw her family again. It sounds like they've got a good start. Maybe they're not going to be rich, but the man built a house. I mean, I wish I could have that kind of solution in today's job market. It really sucks that she had to choose between her future and the people that she grew up with, her literal family. It's awful. Story 7. Do adopted kids count? We adopted a 3-year-old from foster care. Cutest, sweetest kid. He had a few issues, but we mostly figured it was because of his history. The issues escalated quickly. When he was 7, he hit our dog with a golf club. We had to keep him away from our dog and our cat. The cat disappeared. We assumed she got out and ran away. Found out years later that he unalived it and threw it in the woods. The last straw was when he burned our home down. We sent him to a residential treatment center where he stayed for 2 years. During that time, he violated a roommate and became extremely violent. The insurance company told us that they wouldn't pay anymore, and we'd either have to pay for him out of pocket, $40,000 a month, or bring him home. We have younger children, and it wouldn't be safe. We ended up telling the state we wouldn't bring him home. So now, we have a verified abuse report against us because we wouldn't bring him back, even though the therapists agreed with our decision. I don't love him. I wish the best for him, but I don't feel anything toward him. I'm just so sorry, internet stranger. I cannot imagine how much pain you have gone through. I hope your family is well and that you know you did the very best you could. I don't know you, but for some reason your story really moved me, and I'm just so sorry you went through this. Wishing you and your family peaceful times ahead. Story 8. Substances, violence, theft, repetitively trying to destroy his younger brother, becoming a danger to myself and others, mental health issues that he refuses to deal with any longer or take his meds for anyone else, just plain off-the-chain behavior that was too much for all of us. I wouldn't call it disowning, as much as putting down boundaries and setting up fences to protect people who don't deserve his treatment. He also tends to be very manipulative and leans towards narcissistic behavior, in that he will habitually lie about you to others and try to play the victim. This can be very damaging to relationships with people that don't understand what's going on, so I'd rather just not bring myself into the equation anymore, because it's too costly and it's not worth it. He lacks empathy and doesn't know how to stop himself from his harmful behavior due to a developmental disability, although he will also admit that he knows what he's doing and he knows that he's manipulative and playing games at times. When he was younger and was under the rules of being a minor, then he had all the help in the world and it was easier to deal with. Story 9. I have been legally disowned by my father. When I was 11, my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer. This was around her second diagnosis in around 4 years. Obviously, she recovered the first time after intense surgery and a lot of chemo, and he did not want to look after her like he did before. He also had a new girlfriend and her family to look after, apparently, and he had no issues leaving us. When my mom passed away when I was 14, my brother, grandmother, him, and I met up to discuss who I was going to live with. The plan was my brother and his family. Father was never considered, and he showed up and declared that he was in the process of going to court to legally emancipate himself from me. He went out of his way to legally declare that I was no longer his child, just so that my brother, 22 years old with a wife and 2 young children already struggling on one paycheck, couldn't seek child support. Needless to say, it stung, coming only days after my mother's funeral. What a jerk. Hugs to you. Peace to your mom. What was the relationship like between the father and the mom before the first diagnosis? Was it happy? Was it tenuous? Was there big issues with it? Granted, a diagnosis like terminal cancer can really change a lot, especially it can change people, but this is awful. This dad needed to have some sort of responsibility to this previous family. And here he is just trying to erase that and starting up again. It's awful. I mean, is there any way a brother or a grandmother could have legally sought child support from this man? Story 10. My mother simply didn't want kids, but never bothered to prevent having all 3 of us to different men. She tried to have my dad put in jail for abuse. Meanwhile, he was working 2 jobs to support us and would come home to a filthy house and my diaper completely loaded. She put all 3 of us in foster care, and luckily my dad got me along with my other half-sisters. Dad got her, but the oldest of us spent 18 years of her life in foster care. I last saw my mother when I was 6 because she had seen that my dad was successful and wanted to use him for money. He brought me to a park to meet her, and she blatantly ignored me and instead was all over my dad. He's a smart man and realized this, and that's the last time I ever saw her. She never sent 1 birthday card or even paid a dime of child support to my dad because she didn't want kids and wouldn't take any steps to prevent it 3 separate times. Congrats, Mom. You're the world's biggest POS.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 11. My mother and her sisters were both adopted into a great family. Recently, my grandfather fell ill and we were told to prepare to say goodbye. So the family gathered. My grandmother has had a hard time with her memory since she had a brain hemorrhage, but she welcomed my aunt into her home during this tough time. Whilst my grandfather was in his final week, Wendy, aunt, took my grandmother's ATM card and proceeded to spend well over $1,000 on herself and get herself a motel room. She also attempted to steal their car. When my uncles found out, she basically disappeared into the wind. After my grandfather passed and his funeral was all sorted, my grandmother went to an attorney to write Wendy out of any inheritance she would get from their estate when she passes. She didn't press any formal charges because the whole process would have been lengthy and more painful for her. She didn't need the extra stress. I'm pretty sure one of my uncles also threatened Wendy to make sure she stayed away from my grandmother from now on, too. Dang. That's some I am a total piece of trash material from Wendy right there. Story 12. A little different. I was disowned, but I deserved it. I was an addict and a mess for a long time. My mom couldn't keep bailing me out of trouble and watch me self-destruct anymore. I wasn't living at home. She came to see me one last time to tell me she was done, not to contact her. She would no longer have anything to do with me. She was in pieces. I can't imagine how hard it must have been for her, but it was the best thing she ever did for me. Once she cut me off, my rock bottom came hard and fast. After a little while of living on the streets and my addiction consuming me, I made my way to a detox center, got a few days clean under my belt, and never looked back. That was almost 15 years ago. After I was clean a little while, I contacted my mom, and little by little we built a relationship again. and now we're really close. I am forever grateful to my mom for letting me fall and letting me back into her life. I have driven through and sometimes even walked through Skid Row in Los Angeles. I've seen the people in tents, the people who just will not give up addictions and have no plans to abandon that lifestyle. Some people have said, maybe after 3 days, if you haven't sought any help, there is no hope for you there. I'm glad to have read a story where someone was able to get help and be able to get past it. Story 13. Not the mom, just her 14-year-old daughter. Often, my mom used to say that I didn't love her. Each day it got worse and worse. The affirmations from her saying that started getting to me, and soon enough, I really did stop loving her. She's not an alcoholic, but there have been quite a few nights where she came home very intoxicated and said horrible things to my brother and me. She lies often. I've caught her stealing my money for her gambling addiction. She wastes $200 to $300 weekly on lotto tickets. About 80% of the time, she's not even paying with her money. She is so irresponsible that she's been fired from around 6 jobs in the span of 2 years. I get called many horrible names daily by her. One major thing she does that bugs me is after her screaming session, she'll try to make it up to me, and when I don't reciprocate her affection, she blames our horrible relationship on me. Didn't want to make this super depressing, but I guess that escalated quickly. Story 14. As Jehovah's Witnesses, my parents disowned my siblings and I several times since I was in my late teens. One of the Jehovah's Witnesses' rules is that you do not associate with others who know the truth but refuse to follow it, including family, and parents are encouraged to disown any children who have left the religion. The first time was when I was 19. It upset me. I was heartbroken, and eventually they changed their minds, only to do it again a couple of years later, and so on, until I stopped caring and no longer attempted to be part of their lives at all. Was seeing a girl in high school. Her family was Jehovah's Witnesses, but she really didn't care. I really liked her, and it was fun. Then she disappeared. Her dad found out, and she was sent to live with her grandmother. Never saw her again. Her sister managed to let me know what happened and that the girl was sorry. Really bummed me out for a couple years. Story 15. My parents didn't disown me. I was just a weird mistake. My mother never wanted a child. She bailed after a few months. My father was a single parent and ended up in prison, life without parole, when I was 14. I finally met my mother. She was a police detective by the time I moved in with her. She threw me out after 2 months. I'm 30 now, and life is typically a little weird around the holidays. But I always get a good laugh when I tell people that my father is in prison for life and my mother is a cop. But then they get super awkward when I tell them that, no, it's not a joke. It took a long time for me to come to terms with it, but I know now that none of it was my fault. Edit. This blew up way more than I expected. Thanks for all the kind words, everybody. I'm sorry, just generally. Story 16. Since it seems to have widened a bit, a family torn apart, based on an aunt and her niece. Aunt starts signs of dementia at a relatively young age, is moved into an assisted living home. Niece, who bounces around jobs, gets hired to go visit her about once a week. Take her out to the mall or a walk in the park, whatever. Paid handsomely. We get an alert that Aunt has a check bounce from her account that should have $5,000 in it. Niece has drained the account, proven beyond a doubt, with receipts. Niece would take Aunt to Aunt's bank machine every Friday and withdrew $200, then fill her car with gas, Aunt can't drive, and charge us hours when she clearly didn't spend hours with Aunt. Charged us claiming she took the aunt to appointments. There was no appointment. We can actually call the doctor for your information. The family rift? For some bizarre reason, Niece's family took her side. Story 17. My siblings and I have stopped interacting with my oldest brother. We found out that years earlier he had violated at least 2 boys. He was an adult at the time. He showed no remorse and turned the story around to say that those boys were at fault. It was so disgusting to watch someone you grew up with treat people so poorly and show such a blatant disregard for others. The good news is that the remaining 4 siblings have become closer, and we're now able to appreciate the good we see in each other. It's true when they say that if you could pick your family, it would look much different than it is. Story 18. My biological father divorced my mom and also his 3 kids, basically bouncing out of our lives and making it clear he wanted next to nothing to do with any of us when he left. Many years later, at my older sister's funeral, that he had the absolute gall to attend, I asked him why he did that. He said, "I thought it would be easier for everyone." He actually meant it was easier for him to run home to his wealthy family and enjoy a second adolescence while my single mother worked 2 jobs to feed 3 kids under 10 with 0 child support from him. Our fathers are 2 and the same. Awful. Story 19. Not the parent, but my mom ceased all contact with my much older half-brother from a different dad. He was a violent, angry addict, would steal from and beat up my grandparents and my mom. She finally had enough. He expired this year, and it's the first time my mom had seen him since she cut him off 15-ish years ago. I now have my own kids, and I've always supported my mom's decision. That said, I feel so sorry for her. More so than when I was just her kid. I can't imagine reaching that point with my kids, and I'm sure she never did either. Story 20. I've disowned one of my siblings. Still have 5 other siblings. My sister is just a horrible person. She's the youngest of the 7, and she's been rotten since she was a teenager. She's much younger than the rest of us, so while the other 6 grew up together, she was almost like an only child. She treats everybody in her life like they're here to serve her needs. Some of the things she's put our mother through are truly horrible. I wouldn't give a care if she disappeared forever. Treats everybody like they're here to serve her needs? Is she that Muffy shrew from Arthur? Story 21. I'm not sure if this counts. I didn't disown him, but I went through a dissociative episode after some really intense trauma, and I honestly couldn't feel any attachment and parental love that I had for my son. I tried not to show it and behave as normally as possible because he was a child at the time and couldn't possibly understand what I was going through. It was pretty disturbing to not be able to feel any sense of bond with him. I eventually got better, but I definitely did not feel what I or most people would call love for him. Story 22. Not a parent, but my parents stopped loving me the moment I was disfellowshipped as a Jehovah's Witness, and I was promptly kicked out. I knew nothing of how to live on my own at the time, but I had a decent job and survived. My brother stopped associating with them 2 years later and lives with me, and they since moved away, 1,500 miles away to be exact. It's easier to tell people that I'm an orphan or that I don't have parents, because it's hard to explain how they would stop loving or want to associate with their own son over some stupid cult rules. Story 23. My father said my mother's issue was she had too many children, and it gave her some kind of brain fever, much like a dog that loses its mind after having too many puppies. My mother said my father felt trapped by me. He was planning to leave when it was just my 2 older brothers, and then my mother got pregnant with me, and he felt obligated to stay. Now that I'm an adult with 2 kids myself, I think I realize that both of my parents are just extremely mentally ill and incapable of loving anyone, including themselves. Story 24. I asked my biological father at 28 why he never tried to see me after he and my mom got a divorce. He said he never wanted to try for any custody arrangement because that meant he would have to pay child support. So the fear of child support led him to stop talking to his 9-year-old. He's currently doing the same thing to my 2 younger half-sisters. Some people just really shouldn't be parents. Story 25. My wife left me and took our son from me when he was 6 years old. I fought for over 5 years to see him, but in the end had to protect my own sanity. The feeling of that parental love turning into just a feeling of his existence is something you simply can't describe. Story 26. I'd love to hear my mother's explanation, although she hasn't contacted me for over 20 years, so I know that's not going to happen. I think you're more likely to get responses from the kids. Story 27. I love my son, but he abused me. When he turned that violence onto his sister by choking her, I had to say goodbye. Story 28. I hope my mom answers this one.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.